So we're back to part 2 so that we can wrap this up and you can go about your merry way. Remember, you should be taking notes of everything in the video that you need. Please note that I did not put any details on the slides. So I'm not going to have you copy slides. You need to be able to listen and take down the most pertinent information so that you will have another source to review and master the material that is before us. So we just finished talking about China in the last video, and I said that we were going to talk about the United States and the Soviet Union and how the Cold War influenced them domestically. The United States domestically is going to completely shift. After World War II, soldiers are coming back, and of course they need jobs. Because of the arms race, because we are now in the nuclear age, and I'm talking 1945 on, we need factories to build all of these weapons. And so, what you see is an industrial military complex emerge. You have a whole industry geared towards the defense of the United States. It goes hand in hand with our Cold War mentality of we must contain communism around the world, not just within our own borders, just keeping it out of the United States, but preventing it from spreading to other parts of the world. And in order to do that, you need military equipment. You need tanks. You need missiles. You get the idea. And so because of that policy, our foreign policy, that entire industry is going to emerge. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, there's one thing I need to mention about the United States. The United States, remember, is going to form NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They're going to form that alliance with other Western democracies who essentially are asking for protection. Their goal is to protect one another. No one wants another World War II. And they make it their business to say, listen, if one of you is bothered, we're all bothered and we're going to stand with you. And of course, they're going to do whatever they can to oppose communism. That's NATO. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, is going to respond with their own alliance of the Warsaw Pact. Now, the thing to remember about the Warsaw Pact, the Soviet Union has satellite countries. These are countries that they control. These countries are not autonomous. The leaders who are in charge, and I put in charge in quote marks, of those countries, like Poland, like Czechoslovakia, you get the idea. They're there only because the prime minister of the Soviet Union approves. If Stalin or Khrushchev or any of the later leaders don't approve of that leader, guess what? That leader's not going to be there. So, they're puppet leaders. The Soviet Union controls those countries. That's why they're called satellite countries. Their goal is to advance the agenda of the Soviet Union. And the Warsaw Pact will do that. Both the United States and the Soviet Union do what they can to influence other smaller countries to essentially join their side. So whether it is through aid packages, sending troops, or sending advisors, that's what they do. Okay? The purpose, of course, is to influence the different countries to side with them. This is one of the reasons why Stalin, remember, and I didn't put these key terms there because we already covered 19.1, Stalin was so opposed to the Marshall Plan. Remember, the Marshall Plan was put forth by the United States as an aid package to help democratic countries rebuild. And of course, it was also offered to countries who, at that point, were not necessarily democratic. But think about it. If a democratic country comes along and offers you hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild, you're going to be friendly towards that country and you're going to be more likely to take on the ideological principles of that country. Stalin knew that and did what he could to stop that aid from coming into Eastern European countries, which he did. And those Eastern European countries became his satellite countries. Okay? So keep that in mind. And it's that mentality that both the United States and the Soviet Union have that really are going to drive these next conflicts here. Remember we said that the United States foreign policy was dominated by the Truman Doctrine, and the heart of the Truman Doctrine was really containment. We must contain communism. We have to keep it from spreading. So, that policy is going to really be challenged, and it's going to manifest in a few conflicts, very important conflicts. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, I do believe. Essentially what happens, North Korea and South Korea had been split, or I'm sorry, forgive me, had not been split. They were trying to unite the people ideologically. And North Korea, who is backed by the communists, they're like, you know what? We need to be on the same page, so we're going to do this by force. Well, guess what happens? You're going to get a war. So what happens is, once the United States learns, oh, my voice, pardon me, I need to drink some water. There's a war going on with my voice. Once the United States learns that the Soviet Union is even slightly involved, or that communism is on the table here, potentially spreading throughout the country, they decide that they're going to join. China is going to get involved in this war. The UN actually sends troops into the southern part of Korea, and China, of course, is going to involve themselves, and they're actually going to push those troops back further into the southern part of Korea, because they felt threatened by UN forces. This war went on for about 3 or 4 years, and I think I had mentioned the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, if I remember correctly, did not necessarily have a lot of ground troops there. It was mainly China, and the war really goes nowhere. You wind up with what to me looks like a stalemate. And the UN troops, now that they're back in the southern part of Korea, what we now call South Korea will become a democracy. North Korea will remain communist under the control of Kim Jong-il. And now two of his sons have been leading since that point, including the guy who wears high heels now. I can't even know his name. But they're communist. That's how we got North Korea, communist, South Korea, democracy. There was a ceasefire, 1953. The country is still divided, but it's divided along a demilitarized area near the 38th parallel. When you look at your textbook or you look at the notes, you'll see a reference to that. As of 2020, it is still divided along the 38th parallel. There have been talks about reuniting. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but that is where we are. Now, Cuban Missile Crisis, I'm not going to talk much about because we've talked about that before. I was going to initially, but for the sake of time, I need to get to the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was probably the most controversial war that the United States has ever been a part of. It showed how far we were willing to go to contain communism, and it showed how serious the United States was about the Domino Theory. Vietnam had been controlled by France for a long time. Well, in 1954, that ends with the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, where they defeat France. So a North Vietnamese man by the name of Ho Chi Minh, he's communist. South Vietnam is led by Ngo Dinh Diem. He's a non-communist leader, but he's kind of shady. He's kind of dictatorial. We help Diem because he's not communist, and it's really going to get us in trouble. We support him because of the domino theory. If Vietnam becomes communist, we feel like all the other countries are going to become communist. So guess what? Ho Chi Minh's goal is to unite Vietnam. Our goal is to keep communism from spreading. It creates a whole mess. And yeah, it's a disaster for the United States. That war dragged on forever and ever and ever. It will ultimately fail. And tens of thousands of American troops die. And it is seen as a major embarrassment to the United States. Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, the Viet Cong, they ultimately, and some will disagree, they win that war. Vietnam is still communist to this day. And again, it showed how willing we were to really keep communism from spreading. Then there's the Cambodian War, which we will talk more about. I'm actually going to do another video where we're going to talk about this one. Cambodia and Laos were actually dominated by the communist Vietnamese. But in Cambodia, this group called the Khmer Rouge, they're a communist guerrilla group. They take over Cambodia under the leadership of a clown by the name of Pol Pot. This man slaughtered millions of his own people. I shouldn't say millions, about over 1 million people. Vietnam winds up invading Cambodia to drive the Khmer Rouge out. Ultimately, but not before he has killed over 1 million of his own citizens. Vietnam is going to take over the country and impose their own harsh rules on the poor citizens of Cambodia who just can't get a break. But again, you see the outworkings of communism and the conflict that it has with the domino theory and with containment. The United States was smart in that we did not try to invade Cambodia to push the Vietnamese back. We really had to let it go. We were burned by Vietnam. We had to get out of there. Otherwise, we were going to lose more lives. So you have to remember the Khmer Rouge, because I sense that they will be on that video. On that region. So here's what I've done. Thinking about the impact of democratic principles of containment. And I say democratic only because the doctrine was born from a democratic, and when I say democratic, I mean as in democracy, not as in the party. A democratic president. The goal of containment is to prevent communism from spreading. The domino theory says if one country falls to communism, the countries around them will fall to communism. You see how foreign policy decisions by a nation can impact or shape other conflicts around the world and impact people who are not necessarily citizens of that leader's country. And we certainly see that with the Cold War so far. I'm going to upload some notes later on. But what I need you to do, there is a Google form response quiz that goes with this video. You should have your own separate notes from this slide, play this thing, or from this video, play it as many times as you need to. But you need to make sure that you answer those. I think there are 2 questions. You're going to type your response in there and then just send it to me. And then I will grade it and put it in the grade book for you. Make sure you stay on top of your work and do not wait until the last moment to do all of this online work. You will crush yourself, you will hurt your own feelings, and no one will be there to help you, because I'm sure mommy and daddy are trying to feed you all. So make sure you do your part. I'll talk to you later. Be safe, and God bless.